Paris, 1942. The city is occupied. People are hungry. People are afraid. And somewhere in a cramped apartment, surrounded by the sounds of a world tearing itself apart, a young man is writing a novel. Not a political manifesto. Not a war journal. A novel about a man who watches his mother die, goes to the beach the next day, and feels almost nothing. That young man was Albert Camus, and the novel was The Stranger. When it was published, critics didn't know what to do with it. Some called it scandalous. Some called it brilliant. Some called it both. But readers felt something they hadn't been able to name before. A kind of strange, terrifying relief. Here's a question nobody really wants to sit with. What if nothing you do ultimately means anything? Not in a dark way. Not in a give up and stay in bed way. But genuinely. Philosophically. Honestly. What if the universe doesn't care about your promotion, your heartbreak, your legacy, or your name? Most of us spend our entire lives running away from that question. Filling the silence with work, with noise, with plans, with meaning we borrow from other people. But absurdism asks you to stop running, to turn around, to look directly at that void, and then to laugh. The absurd itself. Before we talk about the philosophy, we need to understand the feeling. You've felt it before. You just didn't have a name for it. It's that moment at 2 a.m. when you're lying in the dark, and you suddenly think, why am I doing any of this? Why do I go to work? Why does it matter what I eat for breakfast? Why do I try so hard, when all of it eventually disappears? That feeling. That collision between the human need for meaning and the universe's total, devastating silence in response. That's the absurd. Camus didn't invent it. Soren Kierkegaard used the word before him. But Camus lived it. He turned it into a philosophy you could actually use. See, Camus grew up in poverty in Algeria. His father died in World War I before Camus was even 1 year old. He grew up watching people suffer, for reasons that made no logical sense. He watched the innocent punished, and the guilty rewarded. He watched history repeat itself. Like a machine with no off switch. And instead of concluding that God had a plan, or that history had a direction, or that suffering had a purpose, he concluded something far more radical. He concluded that it doesn't. And that's okay. The Myth of Sisyphus. In 1942, the same year as The Stranger, Camus published a philosophical essay. It was called The Myth of Sisyphus. Now, if you remember your Greek mythology, Sisyphus was a king. A cunning, defiant king who cheated death, twice. As punishment, the gods condemned him to push a boulder up a hill for eternity. Every time he reaches the top, the boulder rolls back down, and he descends, and he pushes, and he climbs, and it rolls back down. Forever. No end. No progress. No reward. For most people, this story is a metaphor for futility, for suffering, for the cruelty of existence. But Camus looked at that same story and asked a completely different question. He asked, what if Sisyphus is happy? And that one question changed everything. Think about it. Sisyphus knows exactly what his fate is. He has no illusions, no false hope. He's not waiting for the boulder to suddenly stay at the top. He knows it won't. And yet, he pushes. Not because someone told him it matters. Not because he'll be rewarded. Not because it's building towards something. He pushes because the pushing is his. The struggle is his. The hill is his. Camus wrote, and I want you to really hear this. One must imagine Sisyphus happy. Not resigned. Not broken. Not numb. Happy. The three wrong answers. Now, when people encounter the absurd, when they truly feel the weight of meaninglessness, they tend to respond in one of three ways. And Camus argued that two of them are wrong. The first response is physical suicide. The thinking goes, if nothing matters, why continue at all? Camus rejected this completely. Not for religious reasons, not for moral reasons, but for a philosophical one. Suicide, he said, doesn't solve the absurd. It surrenders to it. It says, I cannot live without meaning. And in doing so, gives meaning the last word. It's an admission of defeat to a problem that doesn't require defeat. The second wrong response is what Camus called philosophical suicide. This is more common and more subtle. This is the moment when someone confronts the meaninglessness of existence and then leaps into religion, into ideology, into a system that promises meaning from the outside. Now, and this is important, Camus wasn't attacking faith itself. He was attacking the impulse to escape the absurd, rather than face it. The impulse to outsource your meaning, rather than build it yourself. He called thinkers like Kierkegaard and Jaspers absurdist philosophers, who got right to the edge of the absurd, and then flinched. The third response, the right one, is revolt. Conscious, defiant, joyful revolt. You look at the meaninglessness. You don't look away. You don't explain it away. And you choose to live anyway. Fully, passionately, on your own terms. What this actually looks like. Here's where most people misunderstand absurdism. They hear, nothing matters, and they think it means, nothing matters. Give up. Why try? What's the point? But that's the exact opposite of what Camus meant. Think about it this way. Imagine you're watching a child build a sandcastle on the beach. The tide is coming in. Everyone can see it. In an hour, maybe less, the entire thing will be washed away. Every turret, every moat, every carefully carved wall, gone. Does the child know this? Maybe. Probably. Does the child stop? No. The child keeps building. More carefully, even. More joyfully. Because the building, the act of building, is not about the sandcastle surviving. It's about the hands in the sand. The focus. The now. That's absurdism lived out. You don't need the sandcastle to last forever, for the building to be worth doing. Camus had tuberculosis for most of his adult life. He lived under occupation. He lost friends to war. He knew, in a way most of us try not to know, that time was limited and uncertain. And he wrote. Constantly. He loved. He laughed loudly, by all accounts. He played football on dusty Algerian pitches with the kind of joy that embarrasses people who think suffering requires solemnity. He once said, "In the midst of winter, I found there was, within me, an invincible summer. Not because winter wasn't real, but because he decided the summer inside him was also real. And that it was his to keep." The people who lived it. Camus wasn't alone in this. Viktor Frankl, whom you may know as the author of Man's Search for Meaning, survived Auschwitz. Not one camp. 4 camps. He watched people die. He nearly died himself. Multiple times. And what he observed, in the most extreme human conditions imaginable, was this. The people who survived were not always the physically strongest. They were the ones who found something to live for. Even something small. A person waiting for them. A book they wanted to finish. An idea they hadn't yet written down. Frankl didn't arrive at absurdism exactly the way Camus did. But he arrived at the same essential truth. Meaning is not found. It is made. You don't discover it like buried treasure. You create it through how you respond, what you choose, where you direct your attention. And here's the uncomfortable, beautiful part of that. If meaning is made, not found, then it can never truly be taken from you. The guards at Auschwitz could take everything from Frankl. His family, his clothes, his name, his manuscript, his freedom. But they could not take his response. They could not take the story he told himself inside his own mind. That interior freedom, that's what both Frankl and Camus were pointing at. The modern disease. Here's why this matters right now. We live in an era of what you might call manufactured meaning. We are sold purpose by algorithms, by brands, by perfectly curated images of lives that don't exist. Every advertisement whispers the same lie. Get this thing, and you'll finally feel complete. Every social media platform is designed to make you feel like you're falling behind. Like everyone else has figured something out that you haven't. And the result? A generation that has more comfort, more information, more choice than any humans in history. And record rates of anxiety, depression, emptiness. Why? Because we've outsourced meaning. We've handed it to metrics, to follower counts, to salaries, to the approval of strangers on the internet. And those things, by their very nature, are never enough. Camus would recognize this immediately. This is philosophical suicide in a tailored suit. This is the leap, not into religion this time, but into optimization, into productivity culture, into the idea that if you just build the right morning routine, achieve the right body, earn the right amount, then life will feel meaningful. But it won't. Because it can't. Because meaning that depends on external conditions is fragile. It shatters the moment conditions change. The absurdist answer is not to try harder to fill the void. It's to stop fearing the void. To stand in it. To breathe in it. And to notice that you're still here. The question of happiness. So what does absurdist happiness actually feel like? It doesn't feel like contentment. It doesn't feel like peace in the traditional, gentle sense. It feels more like aliveness. Like being so present in what you're doing, that the question of whether it matters doesn't even arise. Not because you've answered the question. Because you've transcended the need for it. Camus described his ideal human as the person who lives without appeal. No appeal to God. No appeal to history. No appeal to legacy or recognition. Just this moment. This choice. This action. He pointed to three figures as models. The Don Juan, the lover who loves completely, each time, without pretending that any single love will last forever. The actor, who lives 100 lives, none of them permanent, and finds richness in each. The conqueror, who fights knowing they cannot win the war, but fights brilliantly anyway. What do they share? They refuse to wait for permission to be alive. They don't need the universe to validate what they're doing. They just do it. With everything they have. The hardest part. Now, let's be honest. This is not easy. It's one thing to read about absurdism in a comfortable room. It's another thing entirely to practice it when you've just been diagnosed with something serious. Or when a relationship ends. Or when something you worked toward for years simply doesn't happen. In those moments, the idea that nothing matters can feel less like freedom, and more like a door slamming shut. Camus knew this. He didn't pretend the absurd was painless. He called it a confrontation. He used words like revolt and defiance, not words associated with ease. What he was saying is not, it doesn't hurt. What he was saying is, the hurt doesn't have to have the final word. There's a difference. A crucial one. You can grieve, and still choose to live fully. You can feel the weight of meaninglessness, and still get up and make coffee and call the person you love. You can stand in the middle of the absurd, really stand in it, and still decide that today is worth something. Not because the universe says so, because you say so. And that small, stubborn, human act of saying, today matters because I say it does. That is the bravest thing a person can do. Quiet and earned. Albert Camus died in 1960. A car accident. He was 46 years old. In his coat pocket, they found an unused train ticket. He had planned to take the train that day. His friend Michel Gallimard offered him a lift at the last minute. He accepted. And just like that, A man who had spent his entire career wrestling with the randomness of existence was taken by exactly that randomness. There was no poetic justice in it. No lesson. Just a car. A road. A winter tree. And yet, the books remained. The ideas remained. The Myth of Sisyphus is still being read in 100 languages by people who have never heard his name spoken aloud, only seen it printed on a page. Did Camus need to live forever, for his life to have mattered? He would say no. He would say the writing was worth it because he wrote it. The loving was worth it because he loved. The fighting was worth it because he fought. Not because of what it built toward. Because of what it was. And maybe that's the whole thing. Maybe the boulder doesn't need to stay at the top. Maybe the pushing is enough.